Hello iPad users. I'd like to tell you about a spreadsheet program that works very well with the iPad. It's an offering from Apple called Numbers. It's a spreadsheet program like Google Spreadsheet or Microsoft Excel. On the iPad, you can create cells, formulas, and charts very similar to the charts and graphs that you can end up producing with Google Spreadsheets as well. Newer iPad users can download the application Numbers for free. Those with older iPads, it's about $10. Just want to give you a brief rundown of how it works and show how it can be used with our current lab. I'll start Numbers by clicking on the icon, Numbers, and I'm going to tap to create a new spreadsheet. In this case, I'm going to start with a blank spreadsheet. Across the top are the title of the columns. Along the left side are the titles for the rows. In this particular lab, I'll start titling the columns. Okay. If I tap it once, it will select the cell. If I tap it twice, it'll bring up the keyboard or a number pad. In this case, I'm going to title this first one Interval. Okay, I'm done with that. I'll end up going over to the next square. This one is our time. Done with that. I'll move over to the next square. And these are really just the column titles from our lab. Okay, this one's going to be position. Next one's called displacement. Displacement. Come up with the next one is our interval time. Next, come over here, our average velocity. And let's see, we have another column here, our change in velocity. And our last column, we're calling it acceleration. Adapt these for whatever you may happen to be working on. Okay. So one of the nice things about a spreadsheet is that it can have formulas and automatically fill many of the cells. Let's go ahead and drag this back over. Okay, our intervals, you may remember in this lab, okay, we're starting with interval 1. I'll move on down to interval 2, next interval 3. Okay. Rather than having to fill out every interval, I've already established a pattern, and I'm going to let the spreadsheet fill out the rest of that. I'm not going to do all the ones that are required for this lab, but enough so you can end up getting the idea of what we end up doing. I'm going to end up getting rid of our keyboard here. Okay, I'm going to highlight 3 of those squares, and I'm going to end up selecting something called Fill. You'll notice the box around the cells change from that blue to the gold. Now what I can do is if I drag that, the spreadsheet will recognize the pattern and automatically start filling the cells. I'll go down. How about 12 intervals? All right. Next one, I'm going to end up filling in our time. I'll go ahead and, oops, I'm sorry about that. I'll double click on that. Our first time, of course, was at 0. Next one down, we're at 0.1 seconds. Next, 0.2 seconds. Next, 0.3 seconds. All right. Rather than having to go all the way down, what I'll do again is use that automatic filling feature. Okay, and maybe just a note, those headers should end up having units as well. This is just a demonstration. I'm going to go ahead and tell it that I'm done using the keypad. I'm going to select those 4 cells hit fill, and again drag this down. It saves me the time of having to type each of those in. Now comes the data. All right, at my initial position I was at, I'll go ahead and double click that, 0. And then when I was collecting data I ended up getting 1.2 centimeters, next one down 3.0 centimeters, and so on. I'll go ahead and enter all of that data, but won't bore you with the details. Remember that displacement is the change in position over each of the intervals. So what we can end up doing is subtracting the current position from the previous position. So I'll go ahead and do that. I'll select that cell, I'll double click it, and in this case I'm going to put an equation in there rather than entering data. So I'll end up using the equal sign here. Okay, it now expects some type of a formula. In this case I'm going to end up selecting a cell rather than a number. So our current position, and I'm going to end up subtracting the previous position. And enter. As we'd expect, we can see that it went 1.2 centimeters during that time. One of the convenient things about a spreadsheet is it can end up seeing what our pattern is. So rather than having to continue to type that formula in, what I can do is just identify the square, select fill, and end up dragging down that formula, and it'll do the math for me. In this particular lab, our interval time was the same throughout. I'll go ahead and double click on that. Okay, 0.1 seconds. Let's move on down to the next one, 0.1 seconds. I could continue typing each of those in, or, that's right, yeah, I can highlight. Let me go ahead and select both those, fill. Okay, it's going to end up seeing the pattern, in fact, that there is no change. I'm going to drag this down, and we end up seeing it's the same interval time for each. The last thing as far as the formulas I want to show you is our average velocity. Okay, let me go ahead and double click on that. Again, I'm going to end up using an equation. Remember that average velocity is our change in position, displacement, divided by the change in time, or our interval time. So in this case, I'll hit the equal sign to indicate I'm using a formula. It's going to be the displacement divided by the time. There it goes, and I can go ahead and enter. Okay, so we see 1.2 centimeters divided by 0.1 seconds is 12 centimeters per second. And I'm done doing that. Okay, so guess what I can do again? Yep, I'm going to go ahead and hit the fill key. And what I can do is I can fill in all these other squares, okay, and it will see what the formula I was using was, and go ahead and change that appropriately as we move down the cells. If I select this first one, go over here, we can end up seeing that first one is cell E3 divided by F3. Okay, but let's say I wanted to see what this other line is here. I'll go ahead and double click on that. We now say it's E8 divided by F8. Those are just cell positions. If I were to change the number, the average velocity would end up changing. You can see on the spreadsheet there are a couple of handles that allow us to increase or decrease the number of columns or rows available on the spreadsheet. End up seeing up here, if I need an extra column, I could drag over. If I don't need it, I can slide it back to the left. Over on the left side, I don't need quite this many rows. I'm going to end up reducing that. What I'd like to do now is create a chart with the data that we have in our spreadsheet. So I'll come up here, I hit the plus sign. That allows us to see some of the other features. And I'm going to select chart. As is usual, we're going to end up going with a scatter plot. It brings up this let's see, display on the lower left, and it has a note, tap to add data to this chart. I'll go ahead and tap that. Okay, and I'll start adding data to that. I'm going to go ahead and select my time data and then select my position data. This becomes the X and the Y, or another way of saying the independent and dependent values for the graph. And there's the information in the graph or chart. I may use those terms interchangeably. Okay. And let's see if we can end up adding a few items to help clean up this chart as well. So to select the chart, I'll just click it. We get that blue line around it. Then I'll come up here to the paintbrush and see some of the added features I can end up doing with this. First thing, I'll look at the chart options. Okay, and what I'd like to do is give this chart a title. I'll slide that on. Go back to chart options. Okay, what I'd also like to do is give the x-axis a name. Okay, and I'd also like to give the y-axis a name. Come down here and slide that switch on. Okay, let's come on over to the chart and we'll end up giving that some, let's see, we'll give it some information. I'll use the pinch and expand. I can blow up this chart. Okay, first thing, let's go into the title. There, I've double clicked on title, back up, and perhaps the title. Position versus time. Works out well for this chart. Done. Let's come on over to the y-axis. I can back up there. This one's going to be our position. And that was measured in, so let me go back, centimeters. Done with that. Let's go down to our y-axis, sorry, our x-axis. And that was our position. I'm sorry. That's our time axis. Let's go back to here, time in seconds. Done. Let's go ahead and take a look at this chart. Last thing I'd like to do is perhaps add some type of a trend line. And let's come on up here to the X gives us some of our options. This T, whoops, not the T. There it is. Gives us some other options as far as letters, curves, okay. And just simply, I can end up taking a line. If I had a linear best fit line, I can go ahead and have that. This one may have fit better with a curve, but I'll show you with the straight line. And I can end up dragging one end of that around here. Okay. And there I have my chart. At this point, I can use my standard way of taking a screenshot, the pause and home buttons simultaneously to capture an image of the screen that would go into my camera roll. Hope that helps. Once in the camera roll, you can use the normal editing tools of cropping to produce the image you want. That would be the image that would then go into the drawing for your Google document where you keep your lab report. Hope this is helpful.